One day they loved you like the sun never set on you, and the next, they turned cold like you never even existed. It hits you hard, confusing, painful, and often silent. But let me tell you something, when people suddenly start hurting you, it says more about them than it will ever say about you. So stop blaming yourself. Because what's happening isn't rejection, it's revelation. If you've ever been left on red, betrayed without warning, or made to feel like you were too much, this is your moment. This speech is for you. They loved you when you were quiet, didn't they? When you used to sit in that room and second guess yourself before speaking. When you were still learning how to be confident, still finding your voice. They clapped for you when you were small enough to fit into the box they created for you. But the day you started outgrowing that version, the day you stopped apologizing for being powerful, that's when everything changed. That's when they started backing away. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they never expected you to evolve. It's uncomfortable when the girl who once needed validation no longer asks for it. When she dresses for herself, when she speaks with clarity and doesn't seek approval in every nod. Think about it, though many people in your life started acting strange the moment you began to walk with purpose. It wasn't coincidence, it was discomfort. Because you were no longer who they thought you were. And that's intimidating. Remember school? That shy girl who always sat at the back, too afraid to raise her hand. One day she starts answering confidently, challenging ideas, raising her hand first. Suddenly the same classmates who ignored her now call her too much or trying too hard. Why? Because they liked her silent. They liked her as long as she stayed beneath them. Growth makes people uncomfortable, not because of what you've become, but because of what it shows them about themselves. It happens in relationships too. The moment you stop over-explaining, stop texting first, stop tolerating emotional laziness, suddenly you're distant, selfish, changed. Yes, you've changed. Because your soul finally realized it's not your job to carry the weight of someone else's immaturity. When you begin to raise your standards, people who can't meet them will try to convince you that you're the problem. But you're not. You're just finally awake. You see this in families. You're the quiet one at every dinner table, the one who keeps the peace. But the moment you speak your truth, question toxic patterns, or set boundaries, suddenly you're labeled the disrespectful one. No, you're not disrespectful, you just stopped enabling dysfunction. And for people who thrive in chaos, your peace feels like rebellion. Let's talk about work. That intern who once said yes to every little task, who stayed overtime without a word. The moment she asks for a raise or takes initiative on her own terms, suddenly she's arrogant. She's just no longer the version they could exploit. Growth is threatening when it's not convenient for others. Friendships fade when your evolution outpaces their comfort. You used to spend weekends gossiping, wasting time on people who didn't matter. Now you're busy building a brand, reading books, going to the gym, healing, and that same friend says, "You've changed." Yes, you did. You outgrew conversations that drained you. You outgrew their need to keep you stuck in the same cycle just because it's familiar. The truth is, they missed the version of you who didn't know her worth, the one who let things slide, the one who dimmed her light so others could shine. Growth is beautiful, but it's also lonely. Not because you're wrong, but because the people around you were only connected to your past self. They didn't sign up for your elevation. They were rooting for the version of you who was less healed, less aware, less whole. So now, every step you take toward your higher self threatens their comfort zone. You didn't lose them. They lost access to you. Because who you're becoming isn't for the weak-hearted. And if your presence shakes them, imagine how your full potential will terrify them. They don't always show their jealousy by walking away. Sometimes they stick around just close enough to observe, but far enough to never clap for you. And when they speak, it's not support you hear. It's subtle jabs wrapped in laughter. It's backhanded compliments. It's sentences like, "Must be nice having all that free time to go to the gym," or Not everyone gets lucky like you. At first, you may think they're just joking. But listen closely. Insecurity always leaks through sarcasm. This happens more than we admit at work, at home, even among friends. You show up to a meeting fully prepared, passionate, and ready to lead, and suddenly someone questions your tone, your ambition, or your attitude. Why? Because your confidence threatens their comfort. You didn't say anything wrong. You didn't come in loud. You simply walked in with presence. And that alone is enough to make an insecure person feel invisible. So instead of working on their shadow, they'll try to dim your spotlight. Because it's easier to insult a flame than to spark one of their own. Think about family dynamics. Ever noticed how when you start breaking generational patterns, the people who never healed start to criticize you? You go to therapy, they say you're too emotional. You speak up about trauma, they say you're too sensitive. Number, you're just finally aware. You're no longer pretending. And for people who've lived in denial their whole life, your truth becomes offensive. Your healing is seen as rebellion. But the truth is, their anger isn't about you, it's about what they never had the courage to confront in themselves. Let's not ignore relationships. A woman who knows her worth will always be intimidating to a man who doesn't know his own. When you stop settling for bare minimum, when you say, I need consistency, not just chemistry, suddenly you're difficult. You're too demanding. Number, you're just done begging for love you deserve. But a man who feels insecure in your presence will try to shrink you by questioning your standards. He'll call your confidence ego, your boundaries attitude, and your independence arrogance. Not because it's true, but because it challenges everything he's not. Even in friendships it happens. You share your wins and they go silent. You talk about your dreams and they change the subject. You start a business and they don't repost it, but they repost every meme, every joke, every celebrity scandal. And when you ask for support, they say things like, you think you're better now. Number. You never said that. You never needed to. Because their insecurity said it for you. And the truth is, your glow makes them question why they never lit their own fire. Insecurity will never clap for confidence. And the more you rise, the louder their whispers will get. But whispers don't scare a woman who has found her voice. You don't need their permission to shine. You don't need their validation to exist. And you sure as hell don't need to shrink so they can feel tall. Because the moment you do that, you're betraying the very person you fought so hard to become. Sometimes the insults aren't loud. They're quiet, passive, hidden under the weight of subtle shade. You've changed. You think you're something now. Don't get too ahead of yourself. But every time someone tries to cage you with their words, remember birds were never meant to fit in boxes. And queens don't ask for thrones, they build them. Every dig, every jab, every backhanded compliment says more about the speaker than the listener. When someone tries to tear you down, it's because they're looking up at you. Insecurity has a way of dressing itself in false confidence. But real confidence never needs to insult others to feel secure. It simply is. So the next time someone tries to belittle you with their insecurity, just smile. Because their hate is simply proof that your presence holds power. ChatGPT said, they don't love you, they love what you do for them. That's the truth most people aren't ready to face. Some people enter your life not to grow with you, but to gain from you. As long as you're the one always available, always giving, always picking up the broken pieces of their life, they'll stay. They'll call you ride or die. They'll say, you're like family. But the moment you need something back, silence, distance, excuses. Suddenly you're too emotional, too much, or asking for too much. Number. You're just finally asking for balance. It happens in friendships all the time. You're the one they call at 2 a.m. when they're broken. You're the one they lean on when their world falls apart. But when your world starts shaking, where are they? Suddenly their phone dies, their schedule is full, their empathy disappears. Because they were never really invested in you. They were invested in your energy. You were their therapist, their emotional ATM, their comfort zone. And now that you need support, you realize it was a one-way street the entire time. Think about it. How many times have you helped someone get back on their feet financially, emotionally, mentally only for them to forget your name when they stand tall again? They got the job, they found the relationship, they move forward, and suddenly they act like they don't remember the nights you stayed on the phone while they cried, the meals you paid for, the dreams you encouraged. Because you were a ladder. And now that they're at the top, they have no use for the steps they climbed. In relationships, this truth hits the hardest. You gave your time, your love, your loyalty. You believed in their potential when they didn't believe in themselves. You were patient while they figured life out. You helped them heal from wounds they never even told others about. But once they were whole again, once they found themselves suddenly, you were not the one. Suddenly they wanted space. Suddenly they started looking elsewhere. Not because you changed, but because they were only in love with your light when it was fixing their darkness. Family, don't be fooled. Some relatives are only close when there's a favor to ask, when they need a place to stay, when they want to borrow money. But the second you say no, the second you put up boundaries, suddenly you're selfish, ungrateful, or distant. You see, they were never really family in spirit. They were just using the title to guilt trip you into staying accessible. But love that only exists when it benefits one side, that's not love. That's manipulation dressed in tradition. At work, it's no different. They love your hustle when it serves their goals. They praise your dedication when it makes them look good. But the day you ask for recognition, for promotion, for fairness, they say, don't make a big deal. You see, they weren't investing in your growth. They were exploiting your grind. Because you were useful, not valued. Here's the raw truth. When people only stay during your season of giving but vanish in your season of needing, they were never truly yours. They were renting space in your life with fake loyalty and temporary kindness. Their presence was not proof of connection, it was proof of convenience. So the next time someone leaves after you stop giving, don't mourn the loss. Celebrate the clarity. Because people who only love the version of you that serves them were never worthy of the version of you that loved them anyway. You're not hard to love. You were just loving people who only knew how to take, not give. And when you stopped being the source, they stopped being present, not because you lost value, but because their access was never about you. It was about what came with you. Jealousy doesn't always come wearing fangs and fury. Sometimes it wears lip gloss, smiles wide, claps politely, and calls you sis. It's not always loud. Often, it's quiet. It hides behind compliments like, you're doing well for someone like you. Or, I saw your little project, good for you. Little? Project? Number. It's a full-blown dream. But they can't admit that because deep inside, your growth reminds them of their stagnation. And instead of rising with you, they'd rather watch from the shadows and hope you trip. There's a dangerous kind of energy that enters your life looking like support but feels like tension. You share your good news, a new job, a new house, a win that took blood, sweat, and sleepless nights, and they give you that dry smile. The forced, wow, that's amazing, followed by a quick subject change. They're present but not proud, close but not clapping. They're not mad you succeeded, they're mad it wasn't them. They're not upset about your journey, they're upset they didn't take the same steps you had the courage to. This happens with friends who walk with you but never really cheer for you. They ask questions not out of curiosity, but comparison. How much do you make now? How did you get that opportunity? Must be nice to have time for all that. These aren't compliments, they're coded confessions. They don't admire you. They resent how effortlessly you seem to move, forgetting they never saw the sacrifices you buried behind your smile. You see, jealousy wears a friendly mask, because it knows the moment you see its true face, the relationship ends. So it lingers in disguise. Close enough to copy you, far enough to compete with you. Sometimes it's family. You share your light, your dreams, your breakthroughs, and instead of encouragement, you get warnings. Don't get too big-headed. Stay humble. Humble. You've cried into pillows, doubted yourself through the dark, picked yourself up when no one was watching. And now that you've finally found your voice, they want to quiet it with caution. Number? That's not love. That's jealousy dressed as concern. Because they've settled, and your elevation exposes every excuse they made for why they never chased more. In relationships, it's even more subtle. A partner who claims to love you, but gets uncomfortable every time you shine. You get promoted, they get quiet, you start glowing, they start arguments. Why? Because they fell in love with you when you were unsure, dependent, easier to control. And now that you've stepped into your power, they feel powerless. So they try to shrink your ambition with statements like, "You're changing," or "Don't forget who was with you before all this." That's not loyalty. That's fear. Fear that your success will highlight their lack of effort. Even at work, jealousy wears professional shoes. Your coworkers smile in meetings, but they forward your mistakes in emails. They say we're all a team, but secretly hope you miss the mark. They mimic your ideas, copy your confidence, then compete with the very energy they once praised. You inspire them, but they'll never admit it, because admitting that would mean accepting your brilliance. And that's too much for someone who still hasn't embraced their own. The hardest part? Jealousy isn't always about what you have, it's about who you are. Your peace, your confidence, your freedom. You walk into a room unapologetic, and that alone can shake someone who's never had the courage to be seen. It's not your fault. You're just the mirror they can't face. Because when you shine, you reflect everything they've refused to become. So remember, not every friend is a fan, not every "I'm so proud of you" is real. Some people are just close enough to watch, hoping you fall. They say keep your enemies close. But the real challenge is spotting the jealousy behind the fake applause. Because the ones who smile the widest sometimes hide the sharpest envy behind their teeth. You don't intimidate them because you're loud. You intimidate them because you're clear. You walk into the room with no mask, no filters, no need for validation, and that alone shakes people who haven't even met their real selves yet. You see, you're not the threat. You're the mirror. And nothing scares people more than being forced to confront the version of themselves they pretend doesn't exist. Every time you choose honesty over hiding, authenticity over approval, you reflect something powerful. You show them what's possible when fear doesn't run your life. And that's terrifying to someone still chained to their comfort zone. You're walking proof that excuses are optional and that stings. Because now, they can't say it's too late, it's too hard, or people like us don't make it. You made it. You're making it. And that mirror you hold up, it's unforgiving. Think about that friend who always jokes about your confidence. The one who says, "You really think you can do that?" Or, "Wow, someone's feeling themselves today." That's not sarcasm. That's discomfort. Because when you dare to believe in yourself, it exposes how little they believe in themselves. You didn't offend them, you reminded them of the dreams they left behind, of the potential they never chased, of the power they surrendered in exchange for approval and smallness. It shows up in relationships too. Ever been with someone who was all in until you started evolving? They loved you when you were unsure, when you needed their reassurance, when you kept your light dim to make them feel secure. But the moment you started healing, glowing, demanding more, suddenly you were too much. Number. You became a mirror too clear for them to look into. You reflected the parts they still haven't fixed in themselves. And instead of rising with you, they retreated. Because the reflection was too raw. Even in the workplace, your ambition doesn't annoy them. Your clarity does. Because they've been working in the same space, the same mindset, the same routines for years. And here you come owning your worth, taking risks, raising your standards. You're not just climbing. You're reminding everyone that the ladder is still there. You're showing them that playing small isn't noble. It's a choice. And that choice becomes harder to justify when you walk past them, carrying the dreams they abandoned. It happens in family too. The moment you start breaking generational cycles, choosing mental health over tradition, peace over pleasing, purpose over patterns, you shake the entire foundation. Not because you're disrespecting them, but because your freedom challenges everything they were told to accept. You're the evidence that survival isn't the only way to live. And that's hard for people who've never dared to imagine more. What they don't understand is this. You're not trying to prove anything to anyone. You're just becoming who you were always meant to be. But your existence alone becomes a silent confrontation. You don't even have to speak. Your progress speaks for you. Your healing echoes louder than their judgment. Your confidence screams in the room even when you're silent. And that mirror you hold, it doesn't lie. You see, mirrors don't hurt people. They reveal what's already there. You're just showing them the truth they've avoided. The truth that they too could shine, grow, evolve if only they had the courage. But until they find it, your light will feel like a spotlight on their shadows. And that's why they lash out. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right. And that kind of truth, it doesn't whisper. It roars every time you walk in unapologetically. Silence is the loudest scream that ever existed. You think you've said nothing, but to someone who knows what they did, your silence is a storm they can't escape. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop trying to fix things you didn't break, your silence becomes a mirror, a truth they never wanted to hear. Because words can be twisted, misunderstood, manipulated, but silence is undeniable. There's a moment when you realize your voice isn't required in every battle. That's when your silence begins to speak. Think of the friend who betrayed you, but still expected your energy. You didn't yell, you didn't curse, you just disappeared. And in that disappearance, they felt something they never expected. Accountability. Your silence echoed louder than any confrontation. Because deep down they knew. They knew what they did and now they know what they lost. It's powerful when you stop texting first. When you stop chasing explanations from people who played dumb while you bled. They notice it. Even if they pretend not to. That, "Hey stranger" message, that's not cute, it's guilt, looking for comfort. But you're not offering comfort anymore. You're not feeding what hurt you. Your silence has become a boundary, a fortress. And every time they feel the distance, they hear the truth they didn't want to face. You outgrew their chaos. In relationships, silence becomes a revolution. Especially when you've begged someone to understand you, to love you better, to meet you halfway and they didn't. But the moment you stop asking, the moment you stop trying, that silence crushes them. Because for the first time they realize they're not needed in your peace. You've chosen solitude over begging. You've chosen self-respect over reassurance. And nothing haunts someone more than the absence of the person who once fought to stay. At work it's the same. You stop attending the gossip, stop explaining your every move, stop overextending for people who only noticed you when they needed something. And suddenly, your silence becomes strength. You walk in, do your job, walk out, and they start whispering. Not because you're rude, but because your silence is confusing to those who only know how to thrive off drama. They wanted a reaction. You gave them nothing. And that nothing, it speaks volumes. Even in family dynamics, your silence can be rebellion. You stop playing the peacemaker. You stop explaining why you chose a different path, why you won't tolerate disrespect disguised as tradition. You just stop talking. And in that silence, generations of dysfunction begin to tremble. You're not running from your roots, you're rising above them. And that silence, that's your soul saying, "I'm done dancing with dysfunction just because it's familiar." People often say she changed. But what really happened is, you stopped talking to people who never truly listened. They didn't notice your pain when you were vocal, but your silence, that's when they panic. That's when they scroll back to old messages wondering where it went wrong. Silence doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't justify, it just stares back with the weight of truth. The truth is, when someone hurts you and you respond with silence, you've handed them the reflection of their own actions. You didn't become cold. You just became unavailable to everything that kept you burning. You're not punishing them, you're preserving you. Silence doesn't need to slam doors. It just doesn't open them anymore. And in a world obsessed with noise, your quiet evolution is the loudest statement you'll ever make. So here you are, wounded, wiser, quieter, but stronger than you've ever been. You've been bruised by betrayal, cut by words unspoken, stabbed by smiles that hid envy, and burned by the people you trusted the most. But let me tell you, something scars don't make you weak. They make you unforgettable. You didn't break, you rebuilt. You didn't fall apart, you rose in silence. And from that silence, a storm was born. One that doesn't destroy but transforms. People may have hurt you, but you did not become them. You didn't let bitterness win. That, my love, is power. Because in a world where it's easy to become cruel to survive, you chose growth. You chose grace. You chose peace over pettiness. And that decision alone separates royalty from the rest. Remember this. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Your stillness wasn't surrender, it was strategy. Not every war is worth fighting, and not every insult needs an answer. Some battles are won by saying nothing. Because silence has a gravity. It makes people reflect, it makes them wonder. And while they were busy talking, you were busy transforming. That's why your absence became louder than their noise. You left, and suddenly the room echoed with everything you used to be. People don't remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. And you, even in pain, made people feel seen. That's why they come back. That's why they reach out when the damage is done. But you've learned now. Not everyone deserves a second chapter in your story. Some people were lessons, not lifelines. Some were shadows, not soulmates. You had to let them go. Not because you hated them, but because you loved yourself enough to walk away. You are not too much. You are not too loud. You are not too strong. You are exactly as powerful as you were born to be. And if your truth makes others uncomfortable, let it. You weren't born to shrink. You were born to shine. And darling, your shine doesn't need permission. Your power doesn't need validation. Don't dim your light just because it's blinding to those still sitting in the dark. You're not here to beg to be understood. You're here to build a life, a legacy, a level no one saw coming. Be so focused on your purpose that the ones who left feel it in their gut. Be so rooted in self-love that apologies without change don't move you anymore. Be so elevated in peace that chaos knocks but you never open the door. You are the fire they tried to extinguish, the light they tried to shade, the voice they tried to silence. But what they didn't know is you don't burn out. You ignite. You don't disappear. You evolve. And you don't chase love. You attract it. Because when you heal, when you rise, when you set boundaries and guard your energy like the crown on your head, it shows. They feel it. They hear it. They regret it. Let them wonder why you're distant. Let them feel the absence of your energy. Your peace is not up for debate. Your glow is not a gift for the ungrateful. And your journey? It's not meant to be understood by people who chose comfort over courage.